All right, hey class, so today this is your Unit 4 test review. So you will have a test this week on your second face-to-face day. The first three all deals with if this is a function or not. Remember, if you're looking at graphs, you're going to use a vertical line test. So if you pass a vertical line test across or pass a vertical line across this graph, we're looking to see if it touches any 2 points at the same time. And if you'll notice, when our vertical line got right there, it touches those 2 points. So this one is not a function. Let's go ahead and do this one over here. We'll come back to number 2. When I pass my vertical line through this graph, through this squiggly line, does it ever touch the squiggly line more than once at any given time? And it does not. So number 3 is a function. So now when we're given x's and y's, we're looking to see if my x's repeat. So we're looking at the first number in each set of parentheses. And none of them repeat. If they ever repeated, then it would not be a function. But these, they don't repeat, so it is a function. 4 and 5, we're going to take this 2 and we're going to plug it into the x's here. We're going to take this -5 and plug it into these x's here. So on number 2, I'm going to do 4 parentheses plus squared, don't forget that squared up there, plus 2 parentheses minus 8. And in every set of my parentheses, I'm going to put a 2. So I'm going to put a 2 there, and I'm going to put a 2 there. So now I can just punch that into my calculator. I've got 4 parentheses 2 squared plus 2 parentheses 2 minus 8, and that gives me 12. So I'm going to do the same thing with this -5. Again, use parentheses. I'm going to put -5 in my first parentheses. Don't forget that squared because there's a squared there. Plus 2 parentheses. I'm going to put -5 in those. Now I'm ready to punch it into my calculator. So that's going to be 4 parentheses -5 squared plus 2 parentheses -5 close your parentheses minus 8, and that gives me 82. I'm going to check that real quick. So that should be 25, that should be 100. Yeah, that sounds about right. So 82 for that one. All right, so next, this one, it gives me my x value of 1. So now I'm going to go to 1 on my x-axis, and I'm going to find the point that's even with it, and there it is. And what's my y value there? It's -3. So I was given my x, I'm looking for my y. So in this one, I'm looking for my y. I'm given my y, I'm looking for my x. So I'm going to go to 4 on the y-axis. Well, there it is. Now I'm going to go find a point that's even with it, and you got to look both directions because there might be more than one, but this one there's only one. And what is my x value there? -4. Okay. Number 8, we're combining functions. We like it when there's a plus right there because all I have to do is write the first function, which is 3x squared plus x minus 1, plus just go ahead and write the second, which is x squared minus 5x plus 6. And since there's a plus there, I can go straight to combining like terms. Well, I've got an x squared and an x squared. I've got an x and an x term. And then I've got a constant and a constant. So now let's combine our like terms. We have 3x squared plus 1x squared. That gives me 4x squared. I've got a 1x minus 5x. That gives me a -4x. Remember, you can punch 1 plus -5. Always use plus when you're combining them. And it gives you a -4. That's where that -4 came from. And then I've got a -1 plus 6. That gives me +5. And that is my final answer. On this one, you'll notice there's a minus between them. I can go ahead and write the first one. 3x squared plus x minus 1. But then I'm going to put the second one in parentheses with the minus in front of it. It's going to be x squared minus 5x plus 6. So on this one, I have to distribute a -1 throughout those parentheses. That's going to give me 3x squared plus x minus 1. That gives me -1 times positive x squared gives me negative x squared. -1 times negative 5x gives me a positive 5x. -1 times positive 6 gives me a -6. Now let's look for like terms. I've got a 3x squared. I've got a negative x squared. I've got an x term. I've got an x term. I've got a constant. I've got a constant. So now let's combine like terms. Let's combine the x squareds. I've got a 3 minus, there's really a 1 right there. 3 minus 1 is 2. X squared. I've got a 1x and a 5x. They're both positive, so that gives me a positive 6x. I've got a -1 plus a -6. That gives me a -7. All right, so on number 10, if you look up here what we did on number 4, I plugged that 2 into my x's. I plugged that -5 into my x's. I'm doing the same thing with this 2. I'm going to plug it into these x's right here, the f equation, right? So it's going to be 3 parentheses 2 squared plus parentheses 2 minus 1, and I'm adding, I'm going to plug 3 into these x's, the h equation. So it's going to be 3 squared minus 5 times 3 plus 6. And guys, now that it's plus between them, you can go ahead and just punch all that into your calculator. So that's going to give me 3 parentheses 2 parentheses squared plus 2 Let me do that again. So that's 3 parentheses 2 parentheses x squared plus parentheses 2 minus 1 plus parentheses 3 parentheses squared minus 5 parentheses 3 parentheses plus 6, and my answer is 13. Now what you could have done is just punched this part in, because that's your f equation, and then just punched that part in, got 2 answers, and then add them together, but you should have gotten 13. So on this one, I'm going to take g of x, which is 4x, times, so I'm going to use parentheses, f of x, which is 3x squared, plus x, minus 1, parentheses, and I'm going to distribute 4x throughout my parentheses. That's going to give me a 12x, remember add your exponents, that's a 1 and that's a 2, so it becomes a 3. 4x times x gives me a 4x squared, there's a 1 there and a 1 there, and then a 4x times -1 is a negative 4x. And there are no like terms, so I am finished. All right, so now we're given 2 sequences. We have to find the common difference, the 0 term, the explicit formula, and we're going to look for these given terms. So remember, our explicit formula is going to be a sub n equals d times n plus a to the 0. So on these, to write this, I've got to find my difference and my a sub 0. So remember, to find your common difference, you're going to take the second term, which is 8, minus the first term, which is 2, and that's going to give me a common difference of 6. So remember, to find the common difference, you're going to do the second term minus the first term. To find the a sub 0, we're going to find the first term minus the difference. Well, my first term is 2. I just said my difference was 6. And that's going to give me -4. So now I'm ready to plug my 6 into my difference, my -4 into my a sub 0. This is going to become a sub n equals, difference is 6 n. I'm going to do -4. I could do plus -4, but I'm going to do -4. All right, so now we're looking for the 10th term. So all we're gonna do is we're gonna plug 10 into that end. You're ready to punch that into your calculator. And that gives me 56. So there's my A sub 0, there's my difference. Moving on to the next one. Common difference. Well, I got negatives here, so if I were you, I'd highly recommend using your formula. So I need the second term, which is negative 10, minus my first term, which is negative 16. So if you'll punch that into your calculator, it's going to give you positive 6. So it doesn't look like it'd be positive 6, but use your calculator to prove it. Next, I'm going to take my first term, which is negative 16, minus the difference I just found. Punch that into your calculator. Negative 16 minus 6 is going to give me negative 22. So now I'm ready to punch these, or plug these into my formula. My difference is 6 again, minus 22. So to find the fifth term, I'm going to plug 5 into that end. So that's going to give me 6 parentheses 5 minus 22. That's ready for calculator. And that gives me 8. All right, domain and range. If you remember our notes from this section, the domain and range of a line that's not horizontal or vertical will always be, the domain's always going to be negative infinity to positive infinity, and so will the range. The only time that's going to change is if it's a line straight up and down and straight across, and we'll talk about that next semester. So domain, it's not straight up and down, it's not straight across. So for both of these, and it has arrows on both ends, right? So that's always going to be your answer for those. The x-intercept, where does this cross the x-axis? Well, there's the x-axis. That's where it's crossing it. That point is 3, 0. Y-intercept, there's the y-axis. That's where this line touches it. 0, 2. Now, from left to right, is this going uphill, which would be decreasing, or downhill? I mean, uphill, which would be increasing, or downhill that's decreasing, and this one's decreasing. X-intercept, x-axis, that's where my line touches it. 4, 0. Y-intercept, that's where my line touches it. 0, -2. So if you'll notice, your x-intercept's always going to end in a 0. Your y-intercept's always going to start with a 0. This one's going uphill from left to right. This one's increasing.